So baby Cooper has made his appearance into the world. He was born on August 23rd and is literally the most precious baby we could have asked for. He's really not overly fussy. He's fussy when he needs to be, but only when he really wants something or needs something, and he's just perfect in our eyes. I just wanted to share with you today my birth story. I really appreciated and enjoyed listening to other people's birth stories before going into labor, especially being a first-time mom. It really just helped me set my expectations before going into something that I've never experienced before. So I just wanted to share with you mine today, and maybe it could help someone feel a little bit more comfortable about starting a brand new journey, becoming a first-time parent too. To start off my birth journey, my doctor decided she wanted to induce me a week early because I was born with a heart condition. Although everything is fine, it's not really a concern. She just felt like it would be better to just induce me early just to make sure everything was okay, to avoid any like crazy complications if we waited any longer. So on Tuesday morning, she had me go in at 7 in the morning to be induced, and they started me on Pitocin because I was already like starting to go into labor naturally, so they didn't have to do anything else, because sometimes if you're not ready, they will do other things to get you ready to go into labor. So they started me on Pitocin, and it took like 4 or 5 hours for me to honestly feel the contractions. And they really weren't that bad at first. I would say probably like 8 hours in, they did start to become more painful, but I felt like I was managing them. I was in pain, but it was something I could breathe through. And I wasn't sure, like I kept debating on whether I wanted the epidural then or if I wanted it later. But I was gonna get an epidural anyway, and they're like, hey, I know that it hurts. It might hurt worse than you're thinking. And if you're gonna get an epidural, why wait? Like, why wait? And I was like, you're right. Like, I have nothing to prove. I was gonna get it anyway, and I was worried that if I waited too long, I wouldn't be able to get it at all. So I did get it, and they were painful. My contractions were definitely painful, where I would have to stop what I'm doing and breathe through it, but it was nothing that I wasn't capable of getting through. I really had in my mind that it was gonna be way worse than it was. And I'm sure it gets worse if I would have gotten an epidural later on. But I think the epidural was the worst part of it all. I wouldn't say that the epidural itself was painful. It was just uncomfortable, and having to like sit hunched over, and I felt like it took forever, and just not being able to move, just kind of, I don't know. I just felt like that experience was the worst part of the whole thing. And then my epidural only worked on half of my body for like 4 hours, and I could feel it all on my right side still. Part of that was because of my height. I'm 6'1", and figuring out the dosage for someone of my height was a little bit harder, I guess. I don't know, I'm not a doctor, but that was what it was. But it ended up kicking in, and I couldn't feel anything at all. And it wasn't that long after my epidural, Zach ended up sleeping. He ended up getting a headache, and I wanted him to sleep because I didn't really need him throughout the night. I felt like it would be better for him to get some rest so that he could help support both of us the next day, like once Cooper was born. And I think that really worked out the best, is making sure that he was as rested as possible when I didn't really need him. And throughout the night, they kept making me rotate. Like, I felt like it was every 10 minutes. They were like, okay, move, you gotta move, you have to move, just to help speed things up and get the baby moving a little bit more. And the nighttime is a little bit foggy to me, honestly, because I kept trying to like doze off in and out. But basically they just had me rotate. They were really tracking the baby. His heart rate kept dropping during my contractions. And so they started getting a little bit more concerned because the more intense my contractions were, the more his heart rate was dropping. So about 8 a.m. the next morning, after 24 hours of labor, they decided that it was time for a C-section. And once they made the decision to go and have a C-section, like, things moved very quickly. My doctor does think that if we would have waited any longer, it would have turned into an emergency because he was stuck underneath my pelvis and the cord was wrapped around his neck and he just wasn't in a good position. So we went into the C-section and it was wild. Honestly, I just laid there. Like, I was just I don't know. I just laid there. Obviously, if you've never had a C-section before, they make you put your hands out, like straight out, and then they have like the sheet up, and then they cut me open. I couldn't feel anything. I could feel some tugging, but honestly, it really wasn't horrible. I was really, really nervous about it when they were like, all right, we're going in for a C-section. I was nervous. I think the worst part of the C-section was the fact that as soon as he was born, they showed him to me and then they took him away to the other side of the room just to clean him up, get his weight, and do all those things. Zach went with him, but still it was hard for me to just like be so far away and then not be able to move. One thing that did happen is I experienced a lot of damage to my bladder. Like, during my C-section, I was like, they put like a catheter in and I was like, literally, it was pure blood in my catheter. Like, it was something that they were concerned about, but it ended up taking care of itself and I was fine. And then they closed me up and everything was good. And then they put Cooper on me. I was able to hold him back to recovery. I feel like the next like 12 hours are kind of foggy for me. I just don't have that much memory. One, just from all of the medication I was on and just like everything I went through, I think that I just kind of blacked out a little bit. After the C-section, it was time for recovery, which I was the most nervous about. Like, that, I think, was what I was the most scared about, was how recovery was going to go. I heard that recovering from a C-section was pretty terrible and it was a lot harder than having a natural birth, but honestly, it really wasn't that bad. The next day I was up and moving, I was standing up straight. Now, don't get me wrong, like, I had some struggles, like I had to like hold on to the railing and like pull myself out of the bed, but like I was capable of getting up on my own. I didn't really need a ton of help. And like after day 2, like I was like fully independent. I didn't need help with anything. So I don't know. I don't know if I was just like randomly lucky and didn't experience a bad recovery, but after we got home, like I was pretty much normal for the most part. I have a few limitations, but most of them I limited myself because my doctor told me I had to, not because I felt like I needed to. So for the most part, I feel like my recovery's been pretty easy. And I hate to say that because I know some people have really challenging recoveries, especially after C-sections, but it's been a breeze recovering. I feel so good now. I keep like wanting to work out. I know I can't work out yet, but I want to work out so bad. I also wanted to touch on our hospital experience really quick. It was a really good experience. The hospital staff, they were so friendly. They were so just like, they went above and beyond to make sure that like I felt okay, that the baby was taken care of, and that I knew what I was doing. Probably my only complaint that I have with the hospital staff is I feel like sometimes all of the nurses weren't on the same page with what you should and shouldn't do. Like, some were like very pro pacifier, the next one would be like, well, you shouldn't be using a pacifier, and then the next one's like, oh, let's use a pacifier, and you're like, like, when you're a new parent, like, you think that you know what you want to do, but then once you have your child and you're in your arms and you're doing things in real time, your opinions change. And I wasn't sure on some things. Like, I didn't feel like I had like a solid stance on what I wanted to do, but now going into it, I would have a totally different view and I would tell them exactly what I wanted. Because I tried to be open-minded because I'm new, like being a new parent. But I think it's important to just know what you want and tell them what you want instead of like having the differing opinions. Because if you have your own opinion and you stick to that, I think it would be a lot better. But that like was such a minor thing that it really wasn't a big deal, but it was just probably my biggest issue. One thing that really contributed to our hospital experience was that the only people that we had come up to the hospital and meet Cooper was our parents. So they both got to come up and meet their grandchild for the first time, and it was exactly the way I would have wanted it to happen. Now, it wasn't intentional that they were the only ones that came up, but it just kind of worked out that way. And looking back on it, like, I wouldn't change anything. When you go through labor and you bring a child into the world, like, you are going through a lot. Not only are you transitioning into being a new parent, but your body goes through so much and you're recovering. And the last thing you really want is a crowd, especially when you're stuck in a room and you can't really get up and move around like you'd want to. It just worked out for the best. Now, we've had plenty of visitors come meet him at our home when we were in control and it was our own environment, and that worked out way better. If you're kind of debating on whether you want a bunch of visitors at the hospital, my personal experience was less was more. And it kind of gave our parents time to adjust to being grandparents too, because when you have a child, like, it's a big deal for your parents too, because they're entering into a new phase of life. And I just am just grateful for how that worked out. At the end of the day, Zach and I both agree that everything happened the way it was supposed to, whether it was the birth and how Cooper was delivered, the visitors that we had at the hospital, and our just overall hospital experience. We couldn't be more grateful for the sweet little baby that we have. If you have any questions, don't forget to leave a comment down below and give this video a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel and join us for our next adventures. See you next time. Bye.